Hello and welcome back to the channel. I maintain a bad habit of starting series and never continuing them on, but I wanted to do my last, at least for a while, grey hair topic video because I'm going to be changing up soon. I'm going to be getting rid of this. Today I'm going to be talking about all of the things that I learnt as a silver/grey haired gal, all of the kind of trials and the tests. There's the good, the bad and the ugly, and I'm going to share all of them. I'm not just going to share the negative things I've learned, I'm going to share the positive too, because there's probably a lot of people watching this video who want to go grey. I don't want to put you off because it's actually probably one of the best colours that I've been, and I will start that off as my first point to make in this video, something I've learned. And we're going to start with the positives and we're going to end with the negatives, so if you're more interested in one or the other, then you can skip to that point of the video. But let's start with positives. Let's start on a positive note. I would probably put this colour quite high in my list of favourite to least favourite hair colours that I've been, because I always believe that certain hair colours make you feel certain ways and they kind of help you carry a certain energy with you, which I feel like, and I will mention this in the negative section, as nice as this colour is, a lack of colour on my hair does often make me feel less energetic and happy and cheerful. I don't know if that's just like a thing I've made up. I think this hair colour makes me feel and look quite witchy, and I quite appreciate the witchy aesthetic. I've always loved that kind of look. Spacey and as though I might come from like another planet. I feel like you could play with a lot of fun alien looks with hair like this. The next one I'm going to mention is actually the reason why I picked this colour in the first place. Before I went grey/silver, I was yellow, but the yellow had faded into a blonde, which yellow does, and so that's why I picked grey. And I'm mentioning that because I think that's a good point to bring up for people who are already blonde, and for blondes in general. I think grey and silver is a really good colour to achieve if you just want something temporarily, you want to experiment with a colour, you want to do something to shake things up a bit, you fancy a change, but you're too concerned to go a fashion colour or something bright that will take a lot of energy and effort and money to get back out again. So grey is like a fun, just wash in, wash out sort of colour, I would say, for people who fancy a change. I also said that about yellow. Bright yellow is a good hair colour to try when you fancy a change. It's on the same wavelength, honestly, because eventually both silver and yellow hair does fade to a blonde, so it gets you back to a nice base again, a fresh base, so you're ready for a brand new color whenever you want it. So although I've mentioned that it's hard to reach and it's a bit of a process getting there, once you're there, it's worth it because you've got a nice base. You will go back to that base every so often, like every few weeks that go by, your hair will eventually fade. And once you're at that blonde base anyway, that's potential to go into whatever color you want after you've been grey. Often we're told we've got to get our hair to a blonde color in order to achieve red, blue, greens, and you know, we get to that blonde and then we're like, oh god, I don't know if I want to put a bright fashion color on my hair now because I've got this lovely base and I don't want to ruin it. But with this, you're not ruining it, so it's not as scary, I think, for a lot of people. However, if you want to get into bright hair colours, I would say grey is a really good place to start. That will fade to blonde again, then you can maybe try yellow for a little bit, that will fade to blonde again, and then experiment with other colours afterwards. I'd probably recommend something like red or pink first, because that's easier to reverse in my experience. A lot of people don't agree with that with red hair, but it's better than, I would say, blues and greens. On the topic of fading, I would say fading hasn't really mattered as much for me when it comes to grey hair. There's something about the fading process of silver which isn't as daunting and as stressful. I think it's because each different fade when I wash the hair just gives me a different kind of tone of grey and silver, and I've actually noticed that sometimes with some products I've used to get the grey or the silver, actually allowing it to fade provides a better colour, something that I actually preferred more than I did when I first dyed it. And that's because a lot of the hair dye brands that I've tried and the different shades which I've come across often starts with a lot of blue hue in it. So I end up looking like I've got a blue tint in my hair, and I'll get into that on the negative side of this video. But I've often found that, I mean, now this is super faded and it's actually a nicer grey than what I would probably say I had 2 weeks ago. Having it be faded doesn't look obviously faded, because if anything it will just look a bit like a blonde grey or like a blonde silver. Whereas if you've got a faded red for example, it turns into a salmon and that looks like it's a faded red, and I think people would be more aware that your hair needs a topping up because it's looking faded, if that makes sense. Speaking of that all-important maintenance, I've actually noticed that there's a heck of a lot of shampoo and conditioner out there, both online and in most cosmetic stores, that cater for people with silver and grey hair way more than any other hair colour that I've ever seen. I don't know why. I don't know whether it's because there's a lot of people with natural grey hair that try to make it look bright and fresh all the time, so there's like more of a market for it. And I actually found that Provoke was pretty decent considering the price on Amazon. £2 for one, maybe £3 for this or something like that. Basically very, very cheap and lasts a long time. And something I also found very interesting, which I'll leave as a point on its own, putting shampoo on dry hair, like lathering it up on your dry hair and leaving it on for like the majority of the day. So just slapping it on and then sitting and watching TV for a few hours or doing the chores or whatever you're gonna do, just sitting it in a towel can often do a better job than some hair dyes. In fact, I've actually tested this before because once I dyed my hair silver, grey, and it gave me a weird blue. Wasn't happy with it. A few weeks went by, then I tried this method I saw online of just putting a grey brightening shampoo on my dry hair, washed off, and I was like, this is quite impressive. There is a plane going over. Now, I wouldn't necessarily recommend that on fresh roots that haven't had grey hair dye on before, if that makes sense. I'd recommend it on the ends of your hair that have already got a little bit of grey silver in it. I wouldn't say that there'd be many silver shampoos out there that can actually like dye your hair, if that makes sense. But it's a really good method to put on the rest of your hair, which is really handy, I think, because I mean, if this is like a couple of quid a bottle, I can dye my hair a few times using it. And it's like a really good backup, I guess, because if I don't have any hair dye in the house and I'm like, oh my God, I need to quickly like touch up my hair, I'm like, oh, I've got the shampoo, just, and your jobs are done. Speaking of a similar point that I made in my yellow hair dye video, the next one is a considerably lot less staining, leaking and dripping is noted when you've got silver hair. There's a lot of anxiety, I think, when you're putting a bright hair color on your head. You've got red going everywhere, you've got blue flicking on things, you've got, you know, it's just with the grey silver, it's, from my experience anyway, I haven't stained anything. It never comes out on my shirt or on my pillow, or when I'm washing the hair, there isn't a massive amount of colour leaking out, so you can go swimming. There's basically a lot less chance of you staining everything. Maybe you don't want to stain the bath that you're washing your hair in. You don't want to piss your mum off if you're using her towels and you get colour on it. So my next one is, obviously grey and silver is quite a monotone, versatile colour. So it can go with anything. It can suit anyone and it can match anything. So I don't have to stress about the kinds of colours I'm wearing, because with certain hair colours, you want to avoid certain things, in my opinion, because it just looks a bit funny. I steer away from certain colours in my wardrobe during times when I've got a certain colour on my head. But with silver, I haven't had to worry about that. I can wear blacks, greens, blues, pinks, like it just complements everything that you wear. It can suit most people and most styles. I maybe do believe that like a pale skin, I think, looks the best next to grey. It makes your eyes pop, it makes you look more celestial, something like that. Most styles that people have can go with this colour. There's certain people that might believe that they can't have a bright blue or a bright green or a bright pink because it doesn't suit maybe their clothes they usually wear, the sense of style they have, the aesthetic they want. Maybe you've got like a certain era that you like dressing as, maybe, I don't know. Whatever it is, I think that with grey, it doesn't matter as much. And kind of on that same note, the next point I will make is that I feel this colour is more accepted as a society for whatever reason. A lot of workplaces have problems with being a certain hair colour. It's not professional, blah, blah, blah. I think a lot of places would probably accept having grey hair. I can't speak for everyone everywhere, but you know, the anxiety of like, oh, well, will my boss like this, or will I look less professional? I think that isn't as much of an issue with this hair color. So it really, like I said, is suitable for most people and most situations. And so my next point is that I would even go as far as saying that people's busy lifestyles suit this hair color. The fading isn't too much of an eyesore, and actually sometimes it can look better than it did before. Sometimes it can just look like you're a blonde rather than a silver, which isn't the end of the world. But as well as that, roots. I mean, I've got dark hair, so the dark root next to the grey, the silver, doesn't look that odd. If anything, sometimes it looks quite cool. Sometimes it complements it in a weird way. So I haven't been that desperate to top up my roots. I would say that when I had roots with yellow hair, I needed to get rid of them straight away. Something about the dark root next to the bright yellow took away from the vibrancy. If you're somebody who doesn't have a lot of money to spend on getting your roots topped up, or you don't have a lot of time to do it yourself, I would say it's not as much of a problem. So those are the positives. Now let's move on over to the negatives. There aren't as many negatives as positives, can I just say? So that's the first bit of good news. That's the first positive of the negatives. The first and only. But this first one, actually, I'm gonna say first deliberately, because I would say it's not necessarily a negative or a positive. I'm gonna sandwich it in between the positive and the negatives. It's more so just that with getting silver hair, you have to work with toners more so to get better results than you do actual hair dye, like actual colors. That's something that I didn't really know a lot about, not gonna lie. I've spent years experimenting with color, but toners I don't know a lot about. So it is a different language in a way. There might be different research you've got to look into when it comes to your color theory. And something funny that I will mention as a negative, just simply because some people might have had a horrendous experience with this. When you use toner, your hair will go so dark, almost, I want to say black, but it's more like a deep purple. Because you're putting purple in your hair when you tone your hair to get silver a lot of the time, it just goes super dark. And it's definitely a trust the process moment, because you just have to ride it out. You can't freak out and wash it off, as you will simply not achieve the color you wanted. It needs to go through that process, that darkening process. If it helps, just remember when you see that on your head, just remember, you know that you're going to get some good results because you're achieving the thing that's supposed to happen, if that makes sense. There was this one time I left a toner, basically, I had mixed up a toner. I did the whole chemical reaction thing where you add the peroxide to it and you shake it around, and I bottled it back up thinking it would be usable in like a few days. Put it on my hair. It just basically dyed my hair brown. Like, it didn't do the darkening process, and I was like, what's going on? Instead, it just made it this like muddy brown, and I was mortified with myself. It's because I'm dealing with toners and stuff that I didn't have a lot of knowledge on. You know, if I was working with color, obviously I could bottle that up and do it another time, because there isn't as much of a chemical reaction with a manic panic red or a manic panic blue. In fact, there's no chemicals in that. It's just vegetable stain. Speaking of, my next negative is that I needed to get out of the habit of thinking that I had to put a color in my hair to achieve the grey or the silver, because I worked with a lot of manic panics and directions and Arctic foxes to get the silver, to get the grey, but they were really just putting like a blue tint on my hair. And a lot of the time when I tried my usual dyes to get the grey, it wasn't achieving the grey I wanted, because actually what I was supposed to be doing was toning. You don't really add colour to achieve grey, you're supposed to just tone the blonde hair. So that often means that oh god. So that does often mean that you might find yourself working with chemicals a little bit more for getting grey hair, as it's not really a process of slapping colour on and hoping it like covers up some of the stuff you've got underneath. You've got to have a very light base. So a lot of the time when I wanted to refresh my hair colour, it was encouraged by the kinds of products that were actually really good and really worked for my hair. It was encouraged to put peroxide in it, which obviously encourages more damage, but it's only very little, minimal amount. I would say that throughout having this coloured hair, I did have to lighten it just a little bit every so often to make sure it was achieving the silver colour that I wanted. My usual trusty dusty products such as Manic Panic, Arctic Fox, Directions wasn't useful or helpful this time around. For the first time in my life, I was saying, stay away from Directions and Manic Panic. What they do is put basically a lot of blue tint in the product, so that when you put that product on blonde hair, the blue tint makes it appear as if it's almost like a slate grey. I actually preferred the colour it faded to once I'd washed out all that blue, and it left this nice little undertone here, which is what you're looking at now. It did mean that I actually experimented a couple times with some box dyes that I got in the supermarket or just like cosmetics store like Boots or whatever. I would try a couple, which a lot of people recommended online for me to try, assuming that because there's peroxide in those box dye products, it might get me to a better result, but if I'm honest, I didn't notice much of a difference. What I will say though is the best product I did come across, which isn't a box dye, it's a professional hair colour, Weller's Colour Charm collection. The shade T050, T50 was what I personally found to be the best. So that's a little hint if any of you are curious about where to start, which conveniently leaves me to the next point. Do you like how I keep smoothly transitioning to my next point? You will not achieve this colour unless you are white, basically. This is another colour that you can't get slapping it on and hoping and praying. There's been times where I've achieved a blue with a base that was quite risky, such as like a salmon base, and I still managed to make it work just. There was times when I achieved pink using a base that was questionable, and I somehow managed to make it work. With this, you can't really do that. You can't cover things up. You can't use the color wheel to transition from one color to the next. See this as a starting point color, so a bit like yellow was, it's a good place to start your hair color journey because you kind of get blonde first before you want to experiment with different colors outside of your natural, and then you can, this is your like starting point. Because remember, even if you've got a little bit of orange tint in your blonde, the reason why I keep saying it needs to be white is because even with a little bit of orange, putting gray hair dye onto that can sometimes even achieve a green, because you're mixing orange with blue, because like I said, a lot of grey hair dyes do have a tint of blue in it. Oh, I've got cramp in my leg. Oh my god. Speaking of orange hair, my next point is that often you will probably fall into the trap of orange roots. If you're toning your hair to achieve grey and you're putting the toner all over, the chances are you probably do have a little bit of regrowth, but not enough for you to feel that you need to lighten that before putting the toner on. So even with like a little bit of regrowth, if you put toner on the whole thing, I've often found that can turn your natural hair at the roots a bit gingery, like a dark golden color, and next to the gray that might clash a little bit and actually show up a lot more than your like dark roots were in the first place. And that's because you're very, very slightly lightening your natural hair color, like a tinge. So when I was putting toner on, which has a bit of peroxide in it, which lightens your hair a little, that's gonna make it go a bit of a tinge of orange. You'll often find that when your toned hair starts fading, or you know, when your grey starts leaving your hair, the first signs of that will be at the top of your head, where there isn't as much history of grey hair on top of grey hair on top of that bit will kind of lighten first, and the ends will sort of keep the grey sticking around for longer. This part will lighten first and you'll get like tints of orange. You might even be able to see it in my hair today. That's sort of the very first signs. A minor inconvenience, it's not a massive deal, but I have just found generally that area of your hair the most problematic, because actually I've even found when you do use these hair dyes that have a tint of blue in it, like I was mentioning before, the blue often comes up most prominently up here for some reason and then just moves down to silver, probably because that area isn't as lightened as the rest of my hair is. There's even video footage of me achieving that actually, when I tried colour, can't remember the brand. I basically tried this box dye that everyone told me to try, and it gave me streaks of blue in my hair. I'll leave a link to that so you can watch that yourself. But that being said, don't worry too much, as it will eventually fade, as it is quite a light blue when it happens. So it's basically the hair dye's way of cancelling out any orange. So I guess the positive of that is, you know, that once that blue fades, it will fade to an icy color. You'll get an nice little icy undertone. And last but not least, see, I told you there wasn't as many negatives. Having silver hair does make me miss color quite a bit, but that's coming from someone who is used to having different colors in their hair. I personally feel like I lack a lot of color when I look at myself in the mirror. I would consider color quite a big part of my identity. People always associate me as a redhead, and I've always felt the most energetic and fun when I've got a bright color on my hair. I always feel like my mood and my energy that I give off is reflective in the color I've got, even though I like the idea of looking like an icy queen. Like, it feels like a spiritual color. I quite like that aspect of it, but it just makes me not feel as like me. That's a very biased personal point, but I will end the video with that and hope that this gave you a good idea of what to expect moving into the silver hair world. Obviously, I can't bring up all the points. Everyone's experience is different. Some people have a really smooth sailing time with this color. A lot of people online have told me that silver hair hasn't even been hard. It's been quite easy, hence why a lot of people are silver. I guess the only negative I haven't added is that it isn't a very unique color anymore, so it doesn't make me feel as different, which I do like to feel when I'm trying new things with my hair. So I'd like everyone to let me know in the comment section below how your experience of grey hair has been, or maybe you're about to be silver. So let me know if you have any more questions about the stuff I've mentioned, or if you have been put off by what I've said. I really hope not. I'd also like you guys to guess which color you think I'm going to go next in the comment section below. If you like this series, if you enjoyed this video, if you think this is good quality content, give me a thumbs up so I know, because I always look at the thumbs up to thumbs down ratio. I'm on social media such as Twitter, Facebook and Instagram. I got a TikTok, and I've got a tarot reading Facebook page and a tarot reading Instagram if you want to book a tarot reading with me. I'm on Patreon as well, so thank you to my patrons for supporting me. You keep me doing what I love, and I will see you guys for my next video, which will be very, very soon. Bye bye.